BloodRayne, as a film, it should have worked. Now let's not be silly and say it was destined to be great, because it wasn't. But everything about the premise of the game it's based on is entertaining at least. A half-human, half-vampire killing Nazis. I mean, come on, sign me up. Whatever they were going to do with an adaptation, it should never have been subtle or nuanced. And that's exactly why it should have been watchable. And yet somehow BloodRayne the film took the game's premise and the promise, then drained every last drop of life from it. And let's take a look at BloodRayne the film. To understand why this went wrong, it's worth taking a moment to understand the game we're dealing with here. BloodRayne isn't an obscure Berlin-on title pulled from nowhere, but it's not exactly current either. In 2002, the original BloodRayne game hit the shelves and it soon carved out a very bloody name for itself. Like many games at the time, it knew its audience and what appealed. The game's protagonist, Rayne, was a half-vampire, or vampire to give her a proper title. She was working for a secret global organisation called the Brimstone Society, dropping into 1930s Argentina and Germany. She was there to slaughter Nazi occultists before they could give Hitler godlike powers, which, yeah, fair. She had twin arm blades and a harpoon. You'd end up in fights with Nazis wearing jetpacks. Suffice to say, it leaned hard into the early 2000s cool girl aesthetic that Lara Croft had helped popularise. And while Laura was dominating pretty much every lad's bag going, Rayne headed straight to Playboy. Of course, Hollywood was going to come calling, or at least Uwe Boll would, which, as we know, is often where things go badly wrong. It doesn't take a genius to work out what kind of film this should have been. A hyper-violent, globe-trotting, blade meets Indiana Jones action fest. But well, Uwe Boll. Instead of World War II, we are suddenly transported to 18th century Romania. We don't follow an elite Brimstone Society agent. We follow Christiana Loken as Rayne, a victimised circus freak who eventually escapes to hunt down her father, the vampire king Kagan, played by Sir Ben Kingsley. And yes, Gandhi himself is the villain in a BloodRayne movie. I mean, come on. The rest of the cast isn't too shabby either, all things considered. Michael Madsen, Michelle Rodriguez and Matthew Davis played the Brimstone Society. But instead of being a wealthy, global shadow organisation with underground bases, they are basically three grumpy people wandering around medieval villages. They feel less like a society, and more like a failed Dungeons and Dragons party. Somewhere along the way, Meatloaf turns up. He's playing a vampire lord wearing what appears to be my nan's nightgown. Billy Zane is here as well, though I will say, unlike the rest of the cast, he seems like he's having the time of his life hamming it up here. It's like he actually read the script and knew exactly what to expect. The plot revolves around finding three ancient relics of a primeval demon, the eye, the rib and the heart. And not for no reason. Each body part grants a vampire owner a different power if absorbed into their own body. The eye lets the user touch water, the rib robs the cross of its power against vampires, and the heart lets vampires walk in the daylight. Each does relate back to the game, kind of. These are the bits and pieces that Kagan and the Nazis wanted. Of course, we're missing Nazis here, so it's just Kagan. Rayne learns that Kagan wants these body parts for himself, and naturally she can't have that. So she sets about getting these special relics for herself, and then uses them to defeat Kagan. No surprises there then. And that's about the gist of it all. If you try hard enough, you can play make-believe that it actually takes the first two BloodRayne games and remixes them sort of to make a prequel. Gone is the Nazi hunting backdrop. Gone is the pulpy, almost comic book tone. Instead, what you get is a medieval fantasy setting with Rayne on a fairly standard revenge quest against a vampire father. It feels like someone took the name and then built something else entirely around it. Worse still, it's boring. The game thrived on its combat, fast, tight and acrobatic. The film is sluggish at best. The game would have Rayne healing mid-fight by leaping onto the back of a Nazi, wrapping her legs around him and then feeding, all while using them as a shield. In the film, it's just kind of a slow, awkward neckbite. You'd never legally get away with calling the games masterpieces, but they knew what they were. Stylish, violent, and all done with absolutely no concern for subtlety. The games leaned into that. They had an identity, and the film doesn't. Uwe Boll had already given us House of the Dead and Alone in the Dark. Both of those films were already notorious for taking their source material and just throwing it out the window, and it was turning them out as fast and as cheap as humanly possible. The film was shot in Romania to save money, and it shows. Apparently, he actually hired, let's say, working girls for the background extras in the vampire brothel scene because it was cheaper than hiring professional background actors in Romania. Classy. It changed way too much to keep the fans of the franchise happy. Rayne, a fan favourite character known for her snarky, witty, cool girl attitude, she went from being a competent assassin to a sombre, confused wanderer. The aesthetic, it went from high fashion gothic leather to Renaissance fur castoffs. And once again, we end up with a film that has zero reason to exist. All it really needed was to follow the game's lead, a kind of B-movie confidence that said, yes, this is ridiculous and that's the point. The film, it takes itself too seriously. Way too seriously. It leans into long stretches of dialogue, flat delivery, and a kind of lifeless pacing that never really builds momentum. You're constantly waiting for it to kick in, for it to become the film the premise promised. It never does, it just ends. And the strange thing is, the film's cast alone should have elevated this. They're all names that carry some weight, and yet somehow they feel completely disconnected from the film they're in. Ben Kingsley just looks bored for most of it, like he hadn't read the script and he just stuck with it like the rest of us. And this is where BloodRayne really falls apart, because it's not just poorly made. It sits in an awkward space where it's not good enough to recommend and not bad enough to celebrate, and not interesting enough to revisit either. But Uwe Boll, being Uwe Boll, did revisit it. Twice. The next time we see Rayne, she's in the Wild West up against Billy the Kid, for reasons. It's the third film before we actually get to see her do her thing and fight Nazis. Most of the cast didn't return, and in particular most notable, she's played by Natasha Malfoy in both. And if you've been paying attention, you might recognise her as Ayane in Dead or Alive. But those are different videos. The first film, well, it's just frustrating. So, why didn't it work? A half vampire killing Nazis. That's a film. But BloodRayne isn't that film. It's a film about a sad circus girl finding 3 magic trinkets while Gandhi looks bored. It didn't fail because it was cheap. It failed because it was too scared to be the movie the game promised. And that's just the coward's way out of it all. Anyways, I've been Paul and this was Pixels Popcorn. If you've liked this video, then do me a favour and drop me a like. Subscribe as well if you want while you're there. Or don't, I'm not going anywhere, and hopefully I shall catch you on the next rewind. Thanks for watching.